Tollymore, a place to ponder and pray. The story of the Table Cape Christians of Tasmania, Australia. By Peter Hoover. Disclaimer. This is a work of historical fiction. In writing up this account of Edwin and Mary Dean Blackwell and the Christians of the northwest coast of Tasmania, Australia, I did not need to invent any names or events. I had more than enough information to write up this remarkable witness of real Christians, what they decided and how it went. Most of these events took place well over 100 years ago. Obviously, I did not personally witness them. I just heard about them. So, in retelling the story, I definitely needed to resort to a skill that all of my fellow Australians will quickly recognise: the gift of yarning, filling up the blanks with what seems most probable. I apologise for all my guesses that do not seem accurate to you. Yet, beyond all these small, sometimes disputable details, I hope and pray that this truly extraordinary account of real people and real events will inspire you to love the Lord more and to serve Him more faithfully in whatever lot you may have been cast. God bless you. I am an Australian citizen. Most of my children and grandchildren still live in Tasmania, but I was born and raised in Ontario, Canada. Chapter 1. Dawning Intrigue. Well before sunrise, just before the raucous laughter of the kookaburras shattered the silence of our Tasmanian summer nights, I loved to slip away to Tollymore. I always made sure I had the key for my favourite communal vehicle, a little red Toyota, old, well-worn but friendly. Scooting along the coast, high, shockingly high above the sea, I wound my way up, around and about the swoops and dives of the Bass Highway to Tollymore Road. Turning left all at once, I would come to my secret place. Breathtakingly beautiful. The sheep. Imagine, I wonder how many of them in unguarded moments had lost their footing and found themselves hurtling down the cliff hundreds of metres below into the roaring surf. I hope the sheep came with good traction on their hooves. Then, in full Australian glory, the sun would begin to rise over the sea. Oh, what the Lord doesn't think of when He designs creation. The Shakespeare Hills, ubiquitous gum trees and shearing sheds, Rocky Cape, where the SS Southern Cross went down in a storm in 1889 full of potatoes, and rolling hills lavishly dashed with flaming tulip farms or, on occasion, opium poppies in bloom. I loved being here, at Tollymore, with God. But what about the broken fence behind me, on the other side of the narrow paved road, Tollymore Road? Obviously something had stood there, a square of trees, and if one looked sharply in and among the brush, pieces of old grave markers askew. Who would miss the chance? Certainly not me, blessed with an extremely functional curiosity, leaping over the fence, trying not to think of tiger snakes. All of our snakes in Tasmania are shockingly poisonous and legally protected. I flipped up some of the fallen stones. Those still standing, sadly, had suffered the ravages of wind and rain for so long that one could no longer read them. The ones lying flat on the ground fared better. Shackletons, Margats, Deans and Blackwells. I had heard some of those names along the north coast of Tasmania. Later in the day, on another occasion, I stopped at a sheep station along Tollymore Road. A tall, somewhat shy but friendly Australian farmer came to meet me, floppy cloth hat and a smile. Never worried about meeting strangers, I soon warmed to the cause of my visit. That old burial ground along the bluff, do you know anything about it? I saw some familiar names like Dean and Blackwell on the markers there. Do you know who they might have been? No longer mildly interested, but startled, the man said, "My grandmother was a Blackwell? That's strange. I never paid much attention to that graveyard. It does not lie on my property, but I do remember an old derelict building sitting there years ago, when I was a boy. They called it the Grove Chapel." Out of this small conversation and my visits to meeting God on Tollymore Road early in the morning grew an ever-expanding mystery, wonder and excitement that has never come to an end. More and more of the pieces have come together, and although I may still lack details of the larger picture, I think I may safely begin to share my findings. Just to clarify one detail, the friendly sheep farmer I met, Nigel Harris, turned out to be the leader of a local Christian Brethren congregation. The British movement that sent Hudson Taylor to China, Anthony Norris Groves to Baghdad, George Muller to Bristol, where he cared for hundreds of little orphans, and finally the movement who sent Harrison Ord to Tasmania, Australia, at the ends of the earth in the 1870s. Lest I get ahead of my story, let us plunge directly into what happened on Wednesday the 25th of January 1860, when the tide had come up on the River Inglis, not far from Tollymore, and young George Blackwell, the miller's son, tried to prove a point and failed.